With me is Professor Vera Stejskal from the University of Stockholm. Vera is a world-renowned immunologist and is the inventor of a special test for metal allergy called the MELISA test. Professor Vera, would you like to tell us a little bit about your input into the story?
This is a fascinating story, and it's even more fascinating that Danelle lives in Australia, while I live in Europe, in Stockholm, in Sweden, but I do work with MELISA testing and research all over Europe and all over the world. I am a clinical immunotoxicologist, born in Prague, but in 1968 I left my country and started to live in Sweden. There I have been the director of immunotoxicology department at Astra Pharmaceutical for 18 years. And there the test, which is called MELISA, it's a memory lymphocyte test, has been developed. So this is in the pharmaceutical industry. And then it was used for identification of drug allergies in occupationally exposed personnel at Astra, but later on it has been adapted to study delay type hypersensitivity, type 4 hypersensitivity for different allergens. I already mentioned drugs, but also metals, later on more and more metals. And during these years, and it's quite a few years which has been around, we have looked on different autoimmune diseases, including multiple sclerosis. And simply saying, what you can say is that metals either present in your mouth, in dental fillings, or in any other implants, like orthopedic implants, or given or taken by you in the foods, can act as a haptens. That means they are immunologically active. And we are now talking about a certain group of metals which are called transition metals, metals which have this capacity, and there you have, for example, mercury, you have nickel, you have gold, you have palladium and other metals. So what's happening is simply that these metals, which are very small, metal ions, will bind to sulfur groups in enzymes and proteins. By that, they will make the structure change, yes, and the immune competent cells, white blood cells, lymphocytes, will recognize your own cells as a foreign, because metal is sitting in them. So in the case of Danelle, since she had suffered from nickel allergy, not only by MELISA testing, by blood testing, but also clinically, I don't think she tolerates cheap earrings. The plaques in the brain could have been caused by this inflammatory reaction triggered by memory cells. But it's not only the way, there is another way, and Dr. Bruce of course knows that cells which are called oligodendrocytes, which are scavenging cells, so-called macrophages in the brain, they have the capacity to engulf the debris, the bad things which are coming from, for example, from dental cavities into the brain. And if they do that, and definitely mouth is very nearby the brain, as you know, so by these macrophages, the debris or release ions from dental restorations will then reach through venuli into the brain, and if macrophages die, the debris will be released there. And now the oligodendrocyte will come there and engulf it. We can see the pictures then out of these things. And what will happen is that they will die. The problem is that the same cells will produce myelin. So if this happens, there will be demyelinization, yes, which is another part of the MS pathological process. Yes. So by this you can find out if in the individual patients there is a trigger of inflammation. Yes. And in this case of Danelle, it might have been nickel, but maybe something else in the root canal as well.
Yes.
And simply following the golden praxis in allergology, if you are allergic, you remove the triggering signal.
Yes.
This is what we need dentists for, because without dentists you can't do that properly. So this is an example of medicine using the integrative approach, and this is actually the only way. This is not only true for multiple sclerosis. We have published data on different other autoimmune diseases like collagenous diseases, like Alzheimer's disease, and so on and so on. So this is a novel approach, how to treat chronic degenerative diseases by removing of the trigger.
Professor Vera, tell us how many different metals can be tested with this test?
You can, usually we test about 10, but it can be stretched to 20 or 30, and it's definitely not only metals. We can also study delay time hypersensitivity to food allergens, like for example gluten, or to molds like aspergillus, or to any other chemicals with immunogenic properties.
I think it's important for people to understand at this point that heavy metals, and particularly the transition metals, can act in one of two ways and can affect the body in different ways. One is a direct toxic effect by inhibition of enzyme systems which are critical for the maintenance of cellular homeostasis, that is the constancy of the internal environment of the cell and what keeps tissues running normally, like your liver or your kidney or your heart or something like that. But the other way in which they can cause trouble is causing inflammation. Now, inflammation is defined as a tissue reaction to injury, and that injury can be from direct trauma, it can be from chemical burns or from heat or cold exposure, or it can be injury from something in which a metal which is not designed to come into contact with biological fluids but has been placed by a dentist or an orthopedic surgeon, or just the simple things like using cheap jewellery, cheap earrings, which are very much made up of nickel. And nickel is the #1 sensitizer. Vera, in your experience, nickel would be the worst culprit in this regard?
First of all, thank you, Bruce, for extensive explanation. I would just to stress out for people which are outside the immunology that luckily not everybody is affected by the same way.
Yes.
So you need to have some sort of genetic predisposition, hereditary predisposition to react abnormally immunologically, which is then actually the original definition of allergy by von Piquet as an abnormal immune response.
Yes.
So you really need to know if you have allergy to nickel or if you have lesions around your so-called silver fillings, which are of course containing mercury. And if you have this, if you do not tolerate cheap earrings, for example, then you might be at risk to develop these allergic diseases.
Yes.
So in our experience, and this is about 15, 20 years, looking through all sort of immune-mediated diseases, yes, absolutely, nickel is the main culprit, but as a second one comes, unfortunately, mercury, both in the form of inorganic mercury or metallic mercury, which is in dental amalgam.
Yes.
And also, as it used to, and still it is, unfortunately, in many vaccines in Europe and in America, it's mercury in the form of organic mercury, so-called thimerosal. So vaccines, some adult vaccines in Sweden and in Europe still contain thimerosal, which is very unfortunate because thimerosal is a very strong allergen.
Yes.
But there are some other allergens which are not so well known. One of them is gold and palladium. Both are present in dental gold, and gold is not inert, unfortunately. Yes. It's a transition metal, so it can cause these inflammatory reaction. We also have a new allergen which is emerging, and this is titanium.
Yes.
And the reason for that is not dental implantation, but overload of the population with titanium dioxide,
Yes.
which is number E171, and it's present everywhere. It's in sun creams, it's a whitening in the creams, and in the worst case, it's in the pills, in your pills, as a coating. And this is, titanium is not inert, it's also transition metal, and in quite a few cases it might sensitize the people, and those people, if they then get a titanium implant, they might have problems.
Do you know much about the relevance of particle size of titanium dioxide? Are the nanoparticles which are being incorporated into toothpastes and whitening creams and so forth, are they more potentially immunotoxic to the body than the older, larger forms of titanium that were used in sunscreens?
Yes, there is a lot of research going on because they are, of course, concerned about nanoparticles generally.
Yes.
And since nanoparticles has a much higher or bigger surface than macroparticles, they are, of course, taken up much more easily. They go through the cells, and there is a risk of possible adverse effects to the health.
And what about in the orthopedic field, with hip implants and knee implants, as well as, say, metal rods, K-rods for fractured femurs, or plates for fractured forearm bones, radius and ulnar? Obviously, titanium, it replaces a lot of stainless steel in these applications because of its strength and utility. But to what extent is titanium allergen?
Generally, it is a great concern, especially from the regulatory agencies, about the possibility of rare cases of allergies, including, of course, titanium allergy. And as far as I know, Food and Drug Administration, which is, of course, aware of these issues, is really trying to raise discussion about possibility of testing, pre-operative testing.
Yes.
For example, with the MELISA testing, or another test which is generally used in dermatology, which is so-called patch test, skin test. So for people, especially patients at risk, which know already that they have nickel allergy, they should be tested pre-operatively and then get the implants which are proper for them, which body tolerates. This will save a lot of human suffering as well as expensive with transplantation and so on. So this is something we have to live with, that allergies are here. We know about that. In the field of pollen allergy, everybody knows that. This is natural things. People also know that if you do not tolerate cheap earrings, you get problems. If you have eczema under the watch, you have allergy, but allergy is not only skin phenomenon, it can happen everywhere in your body when the metal is deposited.
That's right.
So we need to learn more and educate doctors, dentists and the patients. In this case, Danelle educated herself thanks to internet.
And Vera, tell us, what's the best way for patients to find out where they can get a MELISA test performed?
At the time being, we unfortunately do have a functional laboratory in Australia which performs the test. We do have laboratories elsewhere. We have laboratories in America, in several countries in Europe, but since the logistic is troublesome, we would really badly need the laboratory in Australia. And if anybody is interested, they can go to our website, as Bruce already said, www.melisa.org, and contact us. There is an info@melisa.org. I would also stress out already now is that if you have MS or another serious disease and you are aware of the fact that you do not tolerate cheap earrings, do not rush to the first dentist and ask for help, because unfortunately quite a few dentists know about the issue of risk in people which are allergic to mercury. So please calm down, there is a time. contact Danelle here in Australia.
I think that's very good advice that needs to be heeded. From a technical perspective, the test is performed on blood lymphocytes, and outside of the body, in which they're kept at a nice constant 36 to 37 degrees Celsius, they will die within about 48 hours. It is of critical importance that the blood reach the laboratory within a 36 to 48 hour time frame. And so this is critical for the survival of the lymphocytes, and therefore the ability of the laboratory technician to obtain an accurate reading from those blood cells.